All right, welcome back. This subunit is going to be on resource conservation. It's a super important topic. I could talk about it for years, but I only have 15 minutes for my videos. So this is probably going to be two 15-minute videos so that you can get all the information you're going to need for the tests and the quizzes. So let's get into it. So the objectives are going to be to assess the availability and allocation of resources, discuss problems associated with the use of non-local resources. Non-local is very important. We'll talk about that. We'll compare and contrast the uses of renewable and non-renewable resources. And finally, we'll propose alternatives to using non-renewable resources. So it should just be like kind of a culmination of things that we've learned. We've got certain resource types here that this is pretty general, but we'll just kind of get into it. We've got agricultural land. We've got forested land. So agricultural land, that's going to be like farmland. Any land that humans change, basically, or use to their advantage by changing it. So then we've got forested land, which includes its products and services. So, you know, like wood, timber, paper, yeah, social services, like being able to hike around in a forest, that type of stuff. We've got natural land areas. So this is kind of like wilderness areas, national parks, national monuments, stuff like that. Fresh and saltwater fisheries, mineral resources, which includes mineral fuels and non-fuels. So this is going to be like coal and stuff like that, mineral fuels. And then we've got water resources, and that's kind of a big one. So here's just a nice little graph. You can pause it if you want of resources. I'm not going to get too far into it. We've got our non-renewables with our different categories here. These are like metallic, non-metallic fuels. And then we've got our renewables, which we should all know these ones. This, soil and plants, that's going to be biofuel. Just remember that. Okay, so coal. That's going to be right here. Our non-renewable fossil fuel is coal. It's made up of organic material, so coal is just compressed dead plant material, or I mean even animal material, but it's easier for, there's more plants basically. So coal. Internationally, coal is the most abundant global non-renewable resource. It's widely distributed across the continents, and here's a quiz question right here. 50% of coal in the world is in the United States and in Russia. So the United States has about 23%, I believe, and Russia has around 18%. It's something like that, or 27 to 18, I think that's what it is. But either way, just remember 50% of coal reserves are in Russia and the United States, and the reserves of all global coal are estimated to last 138 years at our current usage rate, which is not a long time considering that we've only been using coal the way that we use it now for about 100 years. And we've been increasing the amount of coal we use since 1986. So something to think about. This number will get smaller with more people and more energy needs too. So this is the current usage rate. We're expected to see an increase in usage of all energy forms. So this will go down. Nationally, coal reserves are going to be called recoverable reserves, which is just coal that can be mined with current technologies. So our recoverable reserves are estimated to be around 263 billion tons. So it seems like a lot. I spelled national wrong here, but it seems like a lot, 263 billion tons. But if we stop exporting coal and we just use it for our current energy needs, we're going to lose all of our coal in about 146 years. So this number is going to go down drastically since this number is going to go down as well. So we're going to start exporting coal if the rest of the world needs it. It's going to be a very profitable commodity. Hopefully we can counteract that by just going towards more non-renewable resources such as wind, solar, wave, all sorts of stuff like that. So this can be negated very easily if we just change our energy system. So here's just a bunch of coal. That's what coal looks like when you pile it up. And this little generator thing is just going to take piles of it and dump it into a truck. So natural gas. This is a kind of a rising commodity. We figured out that natural gas is pretty abundant in America, and we keep finding more reserves of it, and it's a pretty good power source. It's a lot cleaner than coal as well. So in 2007, the EPA showed that proved reserves of consumer grade natural gas was around 237.7 trillion cubic feet. So that's feet cubed. And that's just a measure of volume because it's a gas. We have to measure it in volume. Kind of acts like a liquid there. So this is proved reserves. We keep finding more reserves, all right? So continued exploration adds proved reserves to known totals. But the thing that we want to look at here with this 237.7 trillion proved reserves that we have, 2007 usage was 23.2 trillion cubic feet. So that's around a tenth of all of our natural gas reserves. So in 1 year, we got rid of a tenth of the reserves. That's insane. So we do continue to explore and try and find other avenues for natural gas. And because of this continued exploration, estimates of when reserves will be depleted can't be made with any accuracy because we continue to find reserves. So, since 2007, we still have natural gas. So, that 1/10, that would be 10 years and it would be gone. We still have natural gas, and that's because we keep finding it. The problem with that is that we use it a lot. So, who knows how much there is? And we know right now we've got a pretty good amount to be able to live off of for an okay amount of time, but we don't really know when it's going to run out. So this estimate here, not being able to have an estimate when it's going to run out is pretty serious because we can just continue to use it until it's all gone, and then we're screwed. We don't have time to think about it. So in 1986, I talked about this with coal as well. Natural gas production stayed the same in America, so we were not finding more. We found more, but the problem was that our production stayed the same. So the consumption increased in 1986, and so that led to an increase in the need for imported natural gas. So we started importing natural gas right around 1986 to meet our needs. And here's just a good little graphic of it. This is from 49 to 2011. As you can see, we didn't really import any, and then in 1986, right about here, we started importing them quite a bit. And that's just to be able to offset this little area right here. You could fit it in right here, and it's just basically to offset the consumption versus production. So we don't produce as much as we use. So that's where we get those imports in. Let's talk about oil. So the top 5 oil-producing countries at this time, that means they have the technology to be able to drill and extract that oil from the ground. There are proved reserves in other places that don't quite have that technology quite yet. But right now, the top 5 oil-producing countries are Saudi Arabia, Russia, the United States, Iran, and China. So there are other countries like Venezuela, Nigeria, Niger. Many African countries have a lot of oil, but they just don't have the technology and they don't have the economic boost or need to start refining oil. And that's kind of a good thing, but also a bad thing because they look for other sources for economic needs too. So the top crude producing states in America are, and crude is just oil. It's just like the most basic form of oil. You take it out of the ground, it's crude oil. You still need to refine it. But the important thing about the top crude producing states is that as long as they are in America, it kind of reduces the amount of waste used by transporting oil to us. So we're looking at Alaska, Texas, California, Louisiana, and Oklahoma. And these producing states, this is just, we're sucking it out of the ground. We haven't refined it yet. The thing about Louisiana and Oklahoma and a lot of the Gulf states is that 1/4 of American crude is produced in the Gulf of Mexico. So if you guys remember, I think it was 2006 or something like that, but there was a big BP oil spill. Essentially, that was just a big drill that got loose hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of meters below the surface of the water, and it started spilling oil out from the ground, from the reserves. So we're sucking up those reserves, but we had a technological malfunction that made, I shouldn't say we, BP had a technological malfunction that made it so that there wasn't a seal down where the oil was going through the pipes, so that oil was just going out into the water. And that was a horrible, horrible, horrible thing for the environment. Just remember things like that because oil really isn't so great. 57% of crude and petroleum products in the US in 2008 came from other countries. So we imported those. So we're kind of at the whim of other countries in terms of crude and petroleum products. And a lot of petroleum products are going to be like plastics. We make a lot of plastics out of oil waste and natural gas resin. So here is just a nice little graph of the far-reaching implications of that BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill. This red area is how far the oil got into the ecosystem. So it's just affecting this ecosystem horribly all throughout here. And this is like 5,000 square kilometers. So it's right about here is the dead zone that we talk about all the time in the Gulf of Mexico. So this oil spill really didn't help with that either. All right, let's get into forest. Forests are my favorite things. 30% of the world's land is forest, and countries with the largest forest area are going to be Russia, Brazil, Canada, United States, China, and Australia. So if you've noticed something here, the United States and Russia have a lot of natural resources, and that's what makes them be able to be so profitable and so strong in the world's economic and political scenes. So we have all this stuff, but just think about when we run out of all this stuff. Both of our countries are going to be kind of screwed over. So we need to kind of go along with China and India and a lot of other developing nations with trying to find new technological advancements and promoting the use of technological advancements and employment opportunities in the technological sector to kind of go towards non-renewable resources. Because it's just silly to think that you're going to continue to be the world power if you don't have any more resources. So, primary forests. Primary forests are just areas that haven't been developed by humans yet. They also call them primary growth. So they account for about, or virgin forests, they account for about 36% of the global forest area. But the thing about that is 6 million hectares are lost or modified yearly of these primary forests. So that's going to be a lot in like Brazil, a lot of developing countries. America doesn't have a lot of primary growth anymore. The only places where we really have it are like wilderness areas or national parks because people just go in and screw things up. That's what we do. So global forest functions, there's a ton of them. Production of like paper, timber products, protection of the soil or the water. So we've talked about this before, how trees and deep-rooting vegetation holds the soil together, prevents erosion. Erosion is going to lead to decreases in water quality. So if you prevent erosion, you're going to increase the water quality in that area. They also help with conservation of biodiversity. We talked about how important diversity is, especially biodiversity. It kind of keeps the world running, like with that food web that I talked about earlier. Forests just have really good habitats for all sorts of animals. Social services, we talked about this earlier. This is like hiking, national parks, just doing fun things in the forest without destroying it. And then multiple purposes. So, we could have social services, production, protection of soil and water, conservation of biodiversity. All those things could be happening in one forest. Here's just the world's forests. So we said Australia. Here's their forests. Australia is humongous. Their forest is mostly just dry forest. They have a lot of eucalyptus and types of trees that are able to withstand arid environments. And then here's Canada and the United States. Like we've got a lot too. And then here's Russia, a lot of taiga and temperate mixed forests. So just take a second to look at this, be familiar with it. It's not going to be totally on your quizzes or tests, but you should know where the world's resources lie so you can kind of have an understanding of why things are happening in the world. So here we've got this desert, big desert, and there's conflict going on in these areas all the time over water rights, over natural resources rights. Can you think of why? It's because they don't have any. So, just stuff to think about. And so we're going to stop here, and then we'll get to the next section very shortly.